What's up, it's Cinema Shogun here, and I want to talk a little more about Grant Wahl. For those of you all who might not know, Grant Wahl is a very popular sports journalist that specializes in covering soccer or football, or whatever you want to call it. Well, yesterday, during the Argentina-Netherlands game, Grant Wahl mysteriously died. He was in attendance at the game. He was covering the game. People had seen him at the game. They said he was laughing, joyful. And then before the game was over, he mysteriously drops dead, supposedly. That's what we've been told. Now, I wouldn't speculate this much over someone's death if it wasn't for the fact that his own family, his brother, is online pleading for someone to help him because he does not believe that Grant Wahl simply passed away. He thinks that his brother was killed. Now, was his brother killed? Who knows? Maybe his brother just died naturally. After doing some digging and looking into the situation, I do see that Grant Wahl was sick. He wasn't sick at the time of the game, but while over there in Qatar covering the World Cup, he was at every game. And eventually he kind of grew fatigued and he took some time off. He thought he may have bronchitis, but started feeling better, got back to work, started covering games again, and he was at the Argentina-Netherlands game. And like I said, people saw him laughing and having a good time. So we do know that he had some type of health issues shortly before he passed away. But as far as I can tell, he had already, gotten over that illness. Plus, bronchitis usually doesn't cause people to drop dead in the middle of soccer games. Bronchitis usually doesn't cause young, healthy men to just drop dead while watching and covering a soccer game. Now, I'm sure I'll have a dozen people in my comment sections. Well, technically, bronchitis can do this and bronchitis can do that. Yes, I know freak accidents happen, but typically people who get bronchitis don't just, in the middle of watching a game, just. So I felt like there was something weird going on here. And then I looked into Grant Wahl. Now, like I said, Grant Wahl was a sports journalist. But over the last couple of years, much like a lot of people, he's become way more political. And listen, I don't agree with most of the stuff this dude preaches about and talks about. However, there's no denying the fact that once he got over there to Qatar, he started calling out their government. He was calling out various governments from various different teams. And that's maybe not a good look. I haven't all the way dug through all of his tweets, but I have found some stuff that he was tweeting shortly before he died. For one, from a street crime perspective, Qatar is safer than New York City. The fear in Qatar is connected to the authoritarian police state, and we're seeing that at the World Cup. Now, let me give you all some advice. If you are in a different country, do not tweet or make social media posts talking bad about that country. Do not talk bad about another country's government while being in that country. They do not take kindly to that. You have to understand that overseas, they will show up to your door and arrest you for something you posted online. You could, hey, I think the president's stupid and ugly. They will show up at your door, yank you up and beat your ass and take you to jail for stuff like that. So I noticed that Grant, he felt really comfortable criticizing various countries and how they run their country. He was talking bad about Iran. And listen, I agree with some of the stuff he's saying. I'm just saying it's dangerous when you're over here in another country. You're at the FIFA World Cup, which is the biggest sporting event in the world. It might not be big over here in the US, but they take this stuff very seriously. And when these things happen, government officials from all over the world. They gather there to watch these games. It's also, in many ways, people don't want to acknowledge it, but it's political as well. So there's a lot of shady stuff that goes on around these World Cup matches. Grant knows that because Grant was exposing some of that, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But when you have all of these various countries congregating in one area, and you're already in a foreign country, and you're basically criticizing these people, I mean, you may wind up missing. But I mean, going through his stuff, I found, various things that he would say, complaining about Qatar, exposing Qatar. In fact, right before he died, and I mean right before he died, he posted an article that he wrote exposing some deaths that were secretly happening at the World Cup. When these World Cups come to your city, your town, your country, there's a lot of stuff that has to be done. There's a lot of work that has to be done. Whenever the World Cup comes to a certain city, they clean that city up. They build new infrastructure. And they often hire migrant workers who work for cheap. Well, Grant, just so happens, he was exposing this right before he died. This is Grant's one of his last things that he was talking about online. He posted this to his Substack. World Cup Daily, Day 25. They just don't care. Qatari World Cup organizers don't even hide their apathy over migrant worker deaths, including the most recent one. The Supreme Committee in charge of Qatar's World Cup doesn't care that a Filipino migrant worker died at Saudi Arabia's training resort during the group stage. He suffered a fatal blow to the head during a fall in a forklift accident, information that was kept under wraps until being broken by the Athletic's Adam Crafton. We know that the Qatari Supreme Committee doesn't care because its CEO, Nazar Al-Qattar, told you all you needed to hear in an interview with the BBC that was breathtaking in its crassness. We're in the middle of a World Cup, and we have a successful World Cup. And this is something that you want to talk to me about right now? Al-Qattar said when asked about the worker's death. I mean, death is a natural part of life. Whether it's at work, whether it's in your sleep, of course a worker died. Our condolences go to his family. However, it's strange that this is something that you want to focus on as your first question. So I'm not going to pay to read the rest of this article, but I think you all get the sense of what I'm talking about here. Grant Wahl was exposing the fact that workers, were dying at the World Cup, and they were being covered up. They were being swept under the rug because it's bad PR. And even when called out about it, the Supreme Committee was like, hey, of course workers died. Why are you bothering us about it? That's how they act over in this country. You see, you can't come to other countries with this American mentality, let alone do not ever go to another country with that woke American mentality. It's bad enough that you go over there with the American mentality, but when you go over there with that woke American mentality, it's a recipe for disaster. So Grant being in this country where they do not take kindly to a lot of things, especially all this LGBTQI plus stuff. And Grant was adamant on talking about that, wearing pride shirts to the games and stuff like that. People get beaten in the street for stuff like that in this country. But he wanted to be that activist. He wanted to call this stuff out. And now he's gone. And of course, he could have naturally passed away. But I don't know. It's really fishy and really odd that this young man who had been seen in perfect health, his brother said he was healthy, he had been fine that day. And now he's just gone. The day after, or a couple of days after, he was exposing these deaths that were covered up. Not too long after, he was detained and they took his phone from him and treated him badly for wearing a pride shirt. So this dude was already causing trouble, if you will. Maybe not trouble the way we would view trouble, but over there in Qatar, in their mind, Grant was causing a lot of trouble. And they're not going to deal with that. They can get you whacked in a heartbeat if they want to. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened to Grant, but I find it odd that not only did he just basically drop dead in the middle of this soccer game, they didn't even get him an ambulance. They sent him to the hospital in an Uber. You're at the World Cup. I don't care what country it's in, it should have tons of security. It should have tons of medical professionals on the scene. Paramedics, you name it. When you're at one of these big events, they're supposed to have all that stuff together. And I'm not saying they didn't have all that stuff together. All I know is they hauled this dude off in an Uber and not an ambulance. That is weird. There's no denying that it's weird. So I'm at this point where I'm like, okay, freak accidents do happen, but I'm kind of juggling this. It's either Grant was whacked or Grant fell victim to something that he has been promoting for a couple of years now. Grant was really adamant about promoting this. I'm not even going to say what it is. In fact, Grant's wife works closely with the Biden administration. Grant's wife is Celine Gounder. Celine R. Gounder is an American physician and medical journalist who specializes in infectious diseases and global health. She was a member of the Beer Bug 19 Advisory Board transition team of then incoming U.S. President Joe Biden. So the plot thickens. And Grant's wife is acting shocked about his death. Now, Grant's wife, as far as I know now, she hasn't said anything about thinking Grant was murdered. However, Grant's brother thinks that he was killed. Grant's wife is acting like she's totally shocked. And I'm sure that she's not even going to try to get down to the bottom of the situation, because if she did, she may find that the very thing that she peddled is what caused her husband's death. So this situation, this story, it's so weird, and it's going to be so complicated, and it's going to become so political. On one hand, we got certain people who aren't going to care about this story simply because Grant he got really political in his later years in life. He became almost a political activist. And he would push things like this. And a lot of people aren't going to be okay with that. So they're not going to care what happened to Grant. And then on the other side, a lot of the people who were pushing the same agenda that Grant was pushing, they're not going to look into Grant's death because they know if they find out what really caused his death, it may not look good for them. Grant's wife knows that if we get to the bottom of why Grant died, it may not look good for her because she's been promoting the very thing that killed him, possibly. So we have a story where politically, people from both political parties are going to turn a blind eye to this. On one hand, we have the right, who doesn't agree with what Grant Wahl has to say, mostly. We also have people who feel like, hey, when you're in another country, you need to respect that culture. Then you got people who just care about sports and they don't want to hear about this stuff. And then you got the left, who has been adamant about pushing a certain agenda. And they don't want to focus on Grant's death because when you figure out what caused the death, it may be against their agenda. So there's a big possibility here that we don't know what really happened to Grant. And we will never know what really happened to Grant. But I think there's enough stuff here that I've found so far. And this is just from light research. I think there's enough stuff here that I found so far that should let you know that at least there may have been a motive to take Grant out. It's not like Grant was just he's an innocent person, don't get me wrong, but it's not like Grant was just some random sports journalist over there that turned up dead. Grant was a sports journalist over there that was exposing various things that was happening at the World Cup while promoting a political agenda that goes strongly against the way of life in Qatar. So there is a motive there if someone wanted to take him out, and he had already had run-ins with the security and law enforcement. They already knew of Grant, and if you watch soccer and football, you probably know of him because he's one of the biggest journalists in that little, circle of people who are interested in that sport. So I'm going to continue looking into this story. I know the mainstream media is going really hard right now to be like, no, Grant was bronchitis, he was sick. A young, healthy man who had bronchitis a week or so ago and is over it and is out here smiling, laughing, and running around while watching soccer usually doesn't drop dead from bronchitis. So let's not dumb ourselves down. And the mainstream media is going to dumb us down, and they're going to dumb this story down because at the end of the day, it makes everyone look bad, and it's going to cause a loss of money. America is more concerned about getting Americans into soccer than they're going to be about exposing this death. So let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. Keep in mind, this could have been an accident, and I understand that as well. I'm just saying it looks shady, and I'd rather be safe than sorry, especially when you have Grant's own family asking for help. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and I will talk to you all in the next video.